Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson make up one of the best running back quarterback duos in the NFL. And Henry had some bold claims about Lamar Jackson when talking with Rich Eisen. We talk about that. Anquan Boldin giving us a blast from the past on his Ravens experiences and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Free and available for you on all podcasting platforms, including in video form, where you can like and subscribe on YouTube, and in audio form, where you can follow along and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We're a 5-day-a-week Ravens show, Monday through Friday, plus we have some bonus episodes on the weekends. We go live after every single Ravens game and every single big piece of big news for Baltimore as well. There's been a lot of big news this offseason for the Ravens. And shout out to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners, and if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. Here with me today to talk some Ravens football. If you know the Ravens, you probably know Bruce Cunningham, Ravens' longtime PA guy, obviously was a sports director at Fox 45 and weekday sports anchor. And plus, you've probably heard him on 105.7 sometimes if you tune into that station. Bruce, appreciate you coming back on with me. Glad we can chop it up here for a little bit and talk about this team that, I'll tell you, every year feels like they have Super Bowl aspirations. This year feels a little different, even so.
I talked about this last Saturday on the radio. I think they're sick and tired of this whole bridesmaid thing. You know, they've been right there since, 2019? You know, and this is 2025. That's a long time. That's longer than some NFL careers. And I think there's some grim determination as they go into training camp this year, because I just think they're sick of it. They are set. They've got everything they need. There's no crying. There's not even a whimpering need on this team. Everything is in place, barring injuries, full speed ahead. However, that first 4 games, that's going to be a little bit tough, wouldn't you say?
Even the first 6. I mean, Bruce, you can go down that schedule and you talk about, 5 division winners in their first 6 games. I mean, there is no rest for this
But
team.
You know what? On the other hand, those teams that they have to play, they got to play the Ravens.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's not as one-sided as it might seem. I don't think anybody in the league wants any part of the Ravens this year, you know?
No, and it's a great point. I try to say it as much as I can, where, the schedule looks hard for Baltimore, but, those other teams are looking at Baltimore and their schedule and saying, man, that's a hard one. Like, man, that's a good team over there.
Yeah.
They've added and added. They didn't really lose a ton this offseason. We'll kind of get into that in the final part of the show with their roster and really how stacked it is at the moment. But I want to talk about Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson with you a little bit here, Bruce, in the first part of the show. Derrick Henry, he went on the Rich Eisen show, and Derrick Henry's been doing a little media tour recently. I know the Adam Sandler movie situation has garnered a lot of attention with Adam Sandler and how big of a fan Derrick is. And we know the goal now. It's 2,000. Derrick Henry gets 2,000 yards. He's going with Adam Sandler in a movie. I don't know what the movie is about.
I forget what the title is, but it's something 3. Derrick Henry deserves better than a 3. You know what I mean? Am I wrong? Am I the only one?
He deserves his own feature film. He deserves his own feature film. I mean, you can make something happen for Derrick Henry. But for Lamar and Derrick Henry, we know that those two made an incredible duo last season. They were everything that you could have wanted if you're Baltimore. I mean, how did you think the first year went? Because I really thought that there were no negatives to report about him.
No, there weren't. I mean, Derrick Henry is as advertised. You know, he's a bull. He, like the Russians say, strong like bull. You know, but I mean, we've seen his training videos. We've seen the way he approaches the game. The fact that he spends $250,000 out of his own pocket a year on conditioning, he's literally at the top of his game, and he is a force. I don't know that we've ever seen anyone like him. Earl Campbell. You know, when he was with the Houston Oilers, you saw that for a couple of years, but injuries took him down. Henry just doesn't get hurt, and neither does Lamar. And that's the interesting thing about them both, because they're both very physical players, yet neither one of them ever gets hurt or anything serious, So teaming those two up is a masterstroke, spending the money you needed to spend. And I'll tell you, even with this new deal, Henry's still a bargain. Henry is still way under market per year. So they do everything right and putting those two together. Now, the offensive line, was a gigantic question mark last year. And then your O-line coach passed away. So not only do you have a question mark, you have a new coach coming in, and taking the situation over. Kevin, by the end of the season, that might have been the best unit on the team, So I'm feeling very, very bullish about the offensive line going into this season. I don't know of any weaknesses at all. But as far as Henry and Lamar, everybody in the league would love to have a 1-2 punch like that. You just don't hear of things like that. I mean, you might have to go back to, say, Aikman and Emmitt Smith, to find two guys at that level. So we're very lucky to be seeing this here in Baltimore. And the other thing is, we're so spoiled with this team. This team doesn't get bad year in and year out. Every year they're right in that. It's not a birthright, folks. Okay. Understand how fortunate you are to be a fan of this team in this era.
It's incredible. There's an eye towards the present with this team, but also an eye towards the future. And I'm not just talking about 1 year down the line. Eric DeCosta, you can go back to Ozzie and anybody you want to. These guys understand this is a 3-year thing, 5-year thing, looking that far ahead, which, again, a lot of organizations don't take that approach. Sometimes it's now. Sometimes it is 7 years down the line. There is a balance with Baltimore that I think is absolutely incredible.
When Rashod used to do the State of the Ravens, which he doesn't do anymore, and I hate, because I used to really enjoy that, because Steve Bisciotti can't be anything but forthright. There's not a lot of guile in this guy. He just kind of tells you what he thinks. And I remember at State of the Ravens, I wish I could remember the year, but I remember him saying, we want to be like Pittsburgh, because Pittsburgh, the window never closes. They're competitive every single year. They have stability at head coach. These are the things that we strive for. You know what? The Ravens adopted that stuff from the Steelers, and now they're doing it better than they are, And it's ironic that Bisciotti would get his inspiration from his arch rival, but he told us that's exactly where he got it. And so you have a stable team. You have a team that's competitive every year. Bisciotti's willing to write the checks when he has to write the checks to keep the essential pieces. This is how you run an NFL franchise, right?
100%. And I think that now that you have that stability, you're in contention most every single season. There are a few outliers, but it's mostly every year. And Derrick Henry talked about that a little bit with Rich Eisen. And Rich brought up the comments that Lamar made about the Ravens approaching the season with a vengeance. Bruce, we've heard the team, Odafe always talked about it. Marlon has talked about it. They want to finish higher than they have. They understand it's been disappointing. And Derrick Henry, when asked about, do you agree with that? He said, yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like we left some stuff on the table last year that I feel like we should have accomplished. You got to come into camp and get prepared for the season with a vengeance. And Rich asked specifically, well, what about that Buffalo game? Did you look at that game, obviously, because of the way the season ended last year? Did you think vengeance there? And he said, I think every game, it's every game with a vengeance. Don't circle anybody. I think that's a great mindset to have, especially for a team that, look, it's not just a player-specific mindset. I think, Bruce, you can tell this is a team mindset that everybody believes, everybody's mad about it, everybody wants to strive for greatness here.
They're sick of it, and it's amazing what sick of it can drive you to do, and they understand what it feels like to get there and fall short. And that's a very important thing to understand and to try to come back from. They did almost come back last year. If Mark Andrews catches that ball, hell, who knows how long this season would have lasted. But he didn't catch the ball. But they were there. They were right there yet again. And this is what they're so good at year after year after year. They're going to be competitive. And as I said a minute ago, we are very spoiled in this town.
And one of the reasons why is because Lamar Jackson is the quarterback of this team. And Derrick Henry had some glowing things to say about Lamar. Derrick on Lamar said, quote, he's different to me. He's the best player in the game. I feel like it's been that way for a while. When he steps on the field and he's healthy, the game is never over. A play is never over. And he's the 2-time MVP for a reason. I think it's only going to get better from here. And Bruce, this is a little bold from Derrick, not in the fact that, Lamar is. I think Lamar was the best player in the league last year. I agree with Derrick in that sense. But can Lamar get better? Like, it is scary to think about what a better version of Lamar looks like this season he had.
There are some things he could do better. I'd like to see a lot more accuracy on the deep balls. I think we all would. I mean, he's not perfect in that regard. He also has a tendency to throw behind guys, especially when they're coming across the middle. So, yeah, I mean, he's better than everybody else, but, I mean, there's still things he can get better at. But I like to describe him this way. When I was in middle school in Virginia, we got a team in the ABA called the Virginia Squires, and they signed Dr. J when he was 20 years old, signed him out of UMass. I would go see Dr. J play at age 20, age 21, and leave that building thinking, you know what? I've seen stuff tonight I've never seen before. And Kevin, I never had that feeling again until I saw Lamar Jackson play live. That same feeling within me. This is the level of player that we're talking about here. This is, at some point, he's going to win a championship or two or three. And at that point, when he gets those rings, you might have to start weighing him against Unitas, in terms of impact to this city and to the franchise. And, right now, Unitas is all over it because Unitas has the rings. If Lamar gets some rings, I think it's a fair comparison to make eventually down the road.
It is a scary thing to think of Lamar being better, but you're right. The deep ball for Lamar was fine early on in his career. Certainly took a dip over the last handful of years. This past year, it got better, right? It was better than what it was.
It was.
But that improvement is, again, where we see Lamar have a historic year in so many different facets. And Derek saying, hey, Lamar, he's been the best player in the league for a while, but it can only get better from here. I think it is a true statement. It is a scary statement for the rest of the league. But nobody is perfect. There's always something someone can work on. And for Lamar, with the year that he had, I mean, the fact that he can get even better is, I think it's awesome.
Nobody's perfect, but Joe Flacco in the 2012 playoffs was real close. Okay?
That's probably the closest you can get to perfect.
I went up to him in the locker room after he beat Peyton Manning. No, after he beat Tom Brady. And I said, if I were you, I would go out in the parking lot and start looking for wallets because you're probably going to find a couple. That's how good you're going right now. And he just laughed,
That playoff literally will never be forgotten. One of the best that I've ever seen.
You know what? You beat Peyton Manning and Tom Brady back to back. What else do you need?
And you overcome the lights going out in the Super Bowl. I mean, they were already up big at that point, but I mean, still the fact that run went the way it did, and they let Ray go out the way that he did.
And Joe's still playing. That's
the craziest part, honestly, Bruce. Is we'll see him week 2. He'll come to Baltimore week. That's the first time since he left. He'll be at M&T Bank Stadium.
He'll get a big hand, and it'll be great. Everybody loves Joe.
It'll great pregame, and then once the game starts, all right, time for this defense to lock in and see if a couple Joe interceptions can be on the docket. But man, coming up in the second part of the show, we'll continue talking about some former Ravens and some that were on that Super Bowl winning team. By the way, Anquan Boldin, he shared some wild Ravens stories about his experience in Baltimore. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty to talk about on the show. First, the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Now, Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center, so you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building up your wealth. And for me, I like to order takeout from time to time, and it is added up to a little bit more than I expected. So Monarch has been really good helping me try to budget with that and help me have a better understanding of how much I'm putting into takeout. And so you can take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Again, use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with Bruce Cunningham. And Bruce, Anquan Boldin, we know, one of the best receivers in this team's history, one of the best trades that this team has ever made. And he came over in 2010 from the Cardinals, and he went on the OG's podcast, and he talked about his experience in Arizona compared to what it was in Baltimore, particularly about the defense in training camp practices, where he said in Arizona, the offense ran the practices, right? That was the unit that dominated. And that was it. And he came to Baltimore and he said, man, it was the exact opposite when it came to the Ravens. He said the guys were cheap shotting defenses. The defense was cheap shotting guys after plays and, doing all this crazy stuff, just punking them essentially. And Boldin said, man, if you do what you just did to that guy to me, I'm going to fight everybody here. Like I'm not putting up with that. I'm not doing this. And I thought it was the way he delivered the story was awesome and hilarious. But this organization is unique, Bruce. Their defensive identity being how strong it's been. I mean, Boldin having one idea of how it was in one area and then coming to Baltimore and your reality is just checked pretty quickly.
When you come to Baltimore in that era, the first thing you have to do is you have to go through number 52. because number 52 was waving the banner. It was his shop, you know, and it was interesting because Boldin, especially his first year here, Boldin was a very stern veteran presence. You know, you got that from Boldin a lot. Boldin is one of the few guys that would stare back at Ray. He'd stare right back at him, you know, and that was always interesting to watch. They'd never say anything, but I saw what was going on here. You know, they were kind of stalking each other, but it worked out. I mean, they both got rings, and they're both excellent players. Boldin really solidified the receiving core that year just because of his veteran status. The one thing about the Ravens this year might be different because they're looking pretty good, but receivers always been a problem for the Ravens. And to bring in a guy like that to make the guys around him, because if you remember, they had guys like Mark Clayton and you know, they needed that veteran presence. They needed that veteran to say, you're going to be all right, we're going to win. And that's exactly what Boldin did. And that he didn't even score on it, but that long catch and run he made in the second half of that Super Bowl might have been the biggest play of that game to me, because San Francisco was really coming back. But Boldin, as far as we in the media, he didn't let you in. You know, none of us knew him well, but you really saw what he added to the team, and you saw the respect that he got from the other veterans. And in terms of coming here, Dion, I remember when he came in, he said, "This is defensive paradise." I remember those words coming out of his mouth, you know, and that's the way it is. I'm not sure it's still that way, though. You know, I think the Lamar, Derrick Henry, I think those personalities, I think the scale might be going in the other direction a little bit. But then again, the whole league's that way, isn't it?
I think one of the most interesting comments that we got from the spring practices, OTAs, mini camp, Marlon Humphrey talked about how he really wants to get the defense back to the standard it was during the 2000s era, you know, with Ray and all those guys, and back to, despite having Lamar. And look, he understands, everybody understands Lamar makes this team, like, compared to what the offenses have been in the past, this offense is night and day compared to most of those offenses. But
it is. But I'm going to tell you something. I liked when I read what Marlon said, and then when I heard what Marlon said, what he in effect is saying, he says, "I'll step up on the podium here. I'll be the leader. You know, put it on me," because he's looking around and he's not seeing anybody really older than him. You know, and I think he's ready to ascend into that leadership role, and you got to like it because he's a pro. How many people remember his dad? Do you remember his dad?
Bobby
Humphrey. Great player at Alabama, 1,000-yard rusher for the Broncos, blew his knee up. I think he only played 2 seasons, something like that. But Bobby Humphrey was great, you know. And I used to talk to Marlon about Bobby, and Marlon would get this faraway look in his eye. So, okay.
And the thing that I love about Marlon's mentality there, and the fact that he and others, it's not just Marlon, he and others on the defense are identifying the turnovers, right? He said that, you know, you can play as good as you want to, but the turnovers are going to be the battle. And I have a stat right here, Bruce. When you talk about the turnovers, these are the playoff losses for Lamar. The Ravens have turned the ball over 15 times, but the defense has had just 2 takeaways. So that is a negative 13 turnover differential in the 6 playoff losses in the Lamar Jackson era. You have to force turnovers. Look, the offense, Lamar, Andrews, all that, that's a conversation to be had. But the defense also has not done their fair share in these moments as well.
I tell you what, the rookie starts. If he's as good as they say, Marlon could have a huge year because they're going to play him in that slot a lot, and Marlon kill people in that slot. That might be interesting to watch, you know.
With Jaire coming in, and we'll get to him a little bit as well, you know, the way that Malaki, I think, will free up a Kyle Hamilton and Marlon to an extent as well. I think Jaire fully frees up Marlon because you can play big nickel, putting Kyle Hamilton down there. This is not a team that plays base defense all the time, right? They like to switch up their looks.
Marlon's going to be the beneficiary of all this. You watch and see.
I think Marlon's going to have a huge
stay healthy. That's the only thing that worries me about this year's team. Can they stay healthy? Because if they can, they look awfully scary to me.
Yeah, I'm excited for him. And going back to Boldin for a second, I wanted to tell you this as well that Boldin said. You know, he came in and he said that, you know, they had Ray Rice at running back and he was doing his thing. And he ended up saying, all right, in practice, send Ray my way so that he could make an impact blocking and showing off how physical he was. And apparently the defense loved that. They were like, oh man, we got a dog here. Like, all right, let's go. Apparently. And he talked about guys like Ray and Ed, mentioned Bernard Pollard and some of these other guys that were on that defense. that era of Ravens football, and you can talk about how physical that 2000 defense was. Obviously, we all know that, but that 2012 team had dudes that would hit you, and they'd be unforgiving.
Bernard Pollard, I'm glad you brought him up. He's been kind of a pet peeve of mine. They legislated him right out of the game. The style of play that he had, everything he did all of a sudden was illegal, and he was out of the game in about 20 minutes after that. And I always felt bad for Bernard Pollard because he was a good, solid player, but he just couldn't adjust. I mean, he was out there to take your head off, and the NFL doesn't want you to do that anymore. And so you saw a career end right in front of your eyes as a result. I always thought that was kind of a shame.
Look, I'm all for player safety, right? Keeping players safe, players healthy, 100%. But in this day and age, Bruce, with all the rules that have been stacked upon each other, it's like, how do you play defense today? What is a penalty? What's not a penalty? Is there a specific? I mean, because you can't tackle someone high, you can't tackle someone low. It has to be picture perfect, Ralph, or else the opposing offense is moving 15 yards down the field.
I'll tell you one thing I've learned in 30 years of covering the NFL up close. I don't know what I'm looking at on Sunday. None of us do.
Yeah.
You have no idea what you're looking at. You're just watching the ball go back up and down the field. It's like the centipede. You flip it over and all the legs are going. That's exactly what Sundays are with a football team.
Without fail, every single year. But coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about Baltimore's roster a little bit, how stacked it is right now. We'll get into the offseason that Baltimore has had so far, as well as are there really any starting spots up for grabs at all. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll have a lot more coming your way on the show. First, the show is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. You can even read real customer reviews on their site. It's helping a lot of people feel more confident and present in the moment. So head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are committed to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. Back here on Locked On Ravens with Bruce Cunningham. Kevin Oestreicher still chopping up with Ravens football talk here. Bruce, this roster, I mean, I think it's the most talented we've seen in the Lamar Jackson era. I know that people are starting to bring all time into that. It's just the best. I have Kadri Ismail on the show every week, and I got in trouble for even bringing it up with him. He said, nope, stop you right there. 2001, everything else, go ahead and rank them. But I seriously think the way this roster looks, the way that they feel like not only just the star power they have, but the depth that they have behind that star power, it feels pretty picture perfect. And while no roster is perfect, we talked about that. I think it's about as close as you can get in a lot of different areas.
How many teams can go 3 deep at tight end like the Ravens can?
No.
That's a real good example right there. You can lose a starter and you still got 2 guys that can come in and help you. It's just being smart about building your roster and being smart about bringing in veterans that'll fit. They made a big mistake with the receiver a couple of years ago, and I don't think they're going to make that one again. But look at the defensive addition, and look at the offensive addition. These are veterans. These are guys that have been there, and the on the defensive side, you got a $4 million base, 1 year, $4 million base. I don't care if he gets hurt in week 2. That's still a good contract, But that's just the way they do business. It's going to be one of the things the Ravens are known for is they have a long streak of UFAs making the team. Every year they've had one. It's going to be real hard to do that this year. This is going to be a very hard roster to make, and you're gonna have your eyebrows go up at some of the people that don't make this roster. That's how good these guys are. But will it play? Can you put it on the field? Can it win? They've shown that it can win. But you got to keep winning once you get into January, and that's been the whole thing. And I love the stat you showed earlier. We shifted something real quickly to something else, but the turnovers and takeaways. everybody says, what happens to them in the postseason? That graphic you put up, that might hit it right on the nose. That might be exactly what's happened to them in the postseason.
Yeah, it is. And again, I know that Lamar is going to get the brunt of it because he's the quarterback and he's the star and he's in my opinion, the best player in the league right now. Like, it is what it is there. But people, they overcorrect too hard to blame everything on him. Where you know, there are plenty of conversations I can point to. One recently, you know, I think it was on ESPN, and you know, it was like, oh well, Lamar, he beat at Houston. It's just Houston. And I'm like, well, you're saying that he doesn't win in the playoffs, and then he wins in the playoffs, and you say, well, he doesn't beat good enough teams. And it's like the goalposts just move every single time.
It's like Philadelphia fans. At Fox, we used to have an anchor man. I don't know if you remember, a guy named Jeff Barnes. And Jeff was a big Philadelphia sports fan, meaning that he was completely out of his mind. So the Phillies won the World Series back in, 03 or something. And he's stomping around the next year, cussing the Phillies up and down. Jeff, they just won the Super Bowl or the World Series. And he went, Tampa Bay. Oh. So that's exactly what you're talking about, you know. But some people you're just not going to please, you know. But the thing that worries me about this era of the Ravens, and it's been a great era. You can start identifying this as an era now. They've been together long enough. If this era does not produce a Super Bowl, is this team going to be viewed as less than it should? That's kind of the thing that concerns me, because we're seeing a fabulous team here. But if it doesn't win a Super Bowl, does it matter? History shows us that it probably doesn't. You know.
And for a lot of these quarterbacks, these all-time greats, I mean, I know that the big Lamar comparison, Bruce, people make is Peyton Manning, who, you know, his first 8 years, he was 3-5 in the postseason, like all that.
Marino never won one. You know?
Right. There have been Hall of Fame, all-time great talents, but I think you mentioned the era. I think the era we're in right now, ring culture dominates this era, where if you do not win a Super Bowl, you are not considered nearly what you should be. And it is fair and not fair at the same time. Where look, championships mean something, but championships, if lack of them at least, don't mean you're not a good player or not a great player, not a Hall of Fame player. There are plenty of players that don't win Super Bowls and plenty of quarterbacks that don't either, that go on to have Hall of Fame careers. Yeah. Yes, it's disappointing, but it shouldn't take away from who they are as a player, especially when it's become, I think, honestly, Bruce, as toxic as it has over the last 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, it probably does. But it's still, if you're a quarterback and you're going to be considered truly great and Hall of Fame caliber and all of that, you have to have a ring. And is it fair? No, but quarterbacks benefit from a lot of things on the plus side of fair too. You know, that's part of the plus and minus that you accept. But I think quarterbacks are always going to be judged by championships. And it's interesting, as great as Marino was and as many yards as he threw for and all the records he set and how he had the Dolphins contending for years and years and years. What's the first thing you always hear about him? Well, he never won a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Is it fair? No, but that's just the way it is. But I want to share something that was not widely reported ever before, because it makes me laugh to think about it. Ed Reed, late in his career, you know, he let his hair grow and his beard and it got gray and all that. Ray Lewis put the best nickname on him I think I've ever heard. Are you familiar with Sanford and Son, the show?
I've heard of it, but I'm not super familiar.
They won't be funny to you, but you look it up after.
Okay.
He called him Grady. Fred's sidekick Grady had the big gray beard and the hair and everything. Well, see, this is generation gap stuff here now.
I know. I just looked it up. I see it with the beard and everything. Yeah,
that's what Ray called him Grady.
I see. This is where I have to get my history on. I have to start channeling my history and getting into.
The 30th year. You know, we were talking earlier.
Yeah.
Started. You know, I remember that first mini camp. And they didn't even have uniforms. They came out in those white, you know, they look like the guards in The Longest Yard, you know, and that was our football team, and we didn't care. And then those ugly uniforms came out that first year, and we didn't care either. Oh, we're in the league. And then that horrible defense. We didn't care. We're in the NFL. It just felt really good. But I watched them build it right in front of me. You know, I remember David Modell literally on the phone selling season tickets, you know, and it was fun watching all of this grow. And Kevin Byrne, the PR guy at the time, he said, you know, we had to do it. We had to do it right now, and we had to be the NFL. And they had 90 days to get that thing up and running and start selling tickets and turn the lights on at Memorial Stadium. It was a massive thing to undertake, and it was a really cool thing to see up close. And I broadcast the first game with Scott Garza. We didn't have an analyst or anything, just the two of us. Ravens and Eagles. preseason at Memorial Stadium. And I have a picture of it somewhere. But that and we recognize the historical nature of it. You know, a lot of times you do something like that, and then when it's over, you say, "Hey, wow, what did we just do?" Yeah. We knew how important this was going in. And I was really honored and thrilled to be a part of that first couple seasons, you know, just to bring it back to the people and just to see it in their face. It was really cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, this organization has come so far. We know the city needed football back, and you know, it is.
I knew Rashod was going to be okay in 2001 when they beat Oakland in the AFC Championship out in California, and he comes up to me. He's got his boys. Comes up to me in the locker room and introduced himself. And I said, "Oh, Steve, nice to meet you," and everything. And I grabbed my photographer. I said, "Come here, let's do something." And Steve said, "No." He said, "This is Arts Day." You know. How many NFL owners would run from a camera in deference, you know, to Art Modell? You know, and I knew Bisciotti was going to be great even then. He's mad at us anymore. He won't talk to us anymore. There are all kinds of rumors why. I hear he took the Ray Rice thing particularly hard. But that state of the Ravens was very unique. And as a fan, you should have appreciated it. You know, the fact that he's willing to sit there and take questions. And I was a lot happier when he was happier. You know, I wonder if he really even enjoys owning the team anymore. I don't know.
He's been great for him. He has been he's been great, and you know, looked at as one of the best owners in the sport, in the game.
You know, the Castle when he rejected the first set of plans, and the architect called him and he said, "Well, what was wrong with him?" He said, "I'm not going to spend $30 million on something that looks like my junior high school." He said, "No, you impress me." So they came back, you know, with that. You know, whenever they get a free agent to visit, he rarely leaves. You notice that? Because they get in that Castle, they look around and they say, "Okay, yeah, this might work."
Yeah, and it did, and it
continues to.
Yeah, and one of the many allures of coming to play for Baltimore. But I want to wrap up with where we started, Bruce, with Derrick Henry talking about Lamar Jackson, because I think that it's a full circle moment for the show here. One of the things that he said was, quote, "While I'm here, I want to help him accomplish big goals and win the Super Bowl. And then when he does that, he's going to win more." Yeah. I mean, there's so much mutual respect between these two guys. You know, Derrick understands that he is watching greatness. Lamar understands how great Derrick Henry has been and continues to be. Sure. You know, we talk about, just earlier in the show, we talked about, man, it'd be a shame if Lamar never won a Super Bowl. There's so much confidence in that building that they're going to get the job done eventually, and so much confidence with Lamar's teammates in him that he's the right man to lead this. And I share that confidence. I think Lamar will win one. Will it happen? Who knows? But there's no one I'd rather want to be the quarterback of this team than Lamar.
I think Lamar is the reason Derrick Henry's here. I think Derrick understands the opportunity, because if you were in his position, you start looking around the league, where can I land? Who could I really help? Where could I maybe get a ring? And, you know, and then he looks and he sees Lamar too. Yeah, I could see where this is very attractive to him, and he's going to be talking him up a lot. Derrick Henry, he wants to have a post-football career, you know, and I don't know if he wants to broadcast or be funny or whatever, but he's pretty good in those commercials, you know, for State Farm. And it's all about building the brand. But I really think Lamar is the reason he's here. I think you're going to continue to hear him say supportive things to Lamar, because I think Lamar can get him the one thing he hasn't gotten in his career, and that's a championship ring.
Yeah.
And they can do that for each other, you know?
I think it's a great point you make, because he also talked a little bit about DeAndre Hopkins, and he said, you know, that's my boy. We're trying to come in and do our jobs, help us win. We know the type of player D-Hop is. We're happy to have him. Like, they have a relationship. Lamar and Derrick Henry had a relationship. Lamar and Jaire Alexander have a relationship. Like, I think that truly, when you're a good organization like the Ravens, opportunities to bring in great players at maybe like a fraction of the price, like you talked about with Derrick Henry and that deal, or Jaire. Other organizations don't get that opportunity because they do not have what the Ravens have, and that is the reputation they have built.
And the chance to get a ring.
Yeah.
And the chance to get a ring. I mean, let's be honest with each other. You know the league. I know the league. There's probably no more than 6 teams every year that are capable of winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And if you're coming in from the outside, you want to be on one of those 6 teams. And that's why you get a Jaire Alexander for 1 year, $4 million. You know, that's why Derrick Henry's playing at way under market rate. They see what's going on here, and I think they see Baltimore as the best chance to get a ring.
100%. One of the best chances in the league, at least the most consistent chance in the league, it feels like, year after year, outside of those dynasties. Like, I
just don't want to come back on this podcast in February and we'll just sit here moaning again. You know, geez, oh man.
Hopefully we're it's good. Like, man, that Super Bowl was so rough, but they won it, and we can celebrate. But you know what?
I'm about to turn 67. I'm concerned that I'm starting to run out of years. But I have seen 2, so I guess I'm lucky.
They need to get you more. Is what I'm going to say to
I'll
them.
take
They need to get you more. But Bruce, I this has been awesome. I appreciate you hopping on the show with me. Before I get you out of here, tell people where they can find you and what I know you're staying busy on 105.7. Is there anything
that's all
else?
I'm doing. I do Saturdays noon to 2. I have no presence on social media. I'm not even on Twitter because I'm seriously retired. I'm even putting on weight to prove it. So just look for me. I'll turn up at some point.
Man, Bruce lived and breathed this Ravens team, and he still does on the weekends. But
from a distance and at my house like this, that's the best way to watch the Ravens. Believe me.
Well, the stories are endless, and I always love our conversations, Bruce. So if you want to hear more of Bruce, be sure to tune into 105.7, 12 to 2 on the weekends to hear him. Bruce, I appreciate you hopping on the show with me, and I appreciate everybody for watching and listening to the show today. On the way out, hit the like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along in audio form. We'll be right back here tomorrow talking more Ravens football on Locked On Ravens.